Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, December 23rd, 2025. Professor Jeffrey Sachs will be here with us in a moment on underestimating Russia. But first, this. History tells us every market eventually falls. Currencies collapse. And look at where we are now. 38 trillion in national debt. Stocks at record highs defying gravity. So what happens next? Groceries, gas, housing, everything's going up. And this dollar, it buys less every day. When the system breaks, your stocks won't save you and your dollars won't either. But one thing will: gold. I've said it on my show for years. Gold survives collapse. Central bankers know this and billionaires know it. That's why they're buying more. Is it too late to buy, or is it just the right time? Call my friends at Lear Capital to find out. Ask questions, get the free information. There's no pressure, and that's why I buy my gold and silver from Lear. And right now, you can get up to $20,000 in bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com today. Professor Sachs, welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. The best of this holiday season, of course, to you and to your family. I do want to spend some time on the European mentality and its persistent underestimating of Russia, but a couple of other things I have to talk about, not the least of which is China. But some breaking news: about an hour ago, Greta Thunberg, the climate and peace activist, was arrested in London because she held up a placard saying, "I support Palestinian action prisoners and I oppose genocide." For saying that on a piece of paper in London, England, she was carted away to jail.
This is happening. This is happening all over the Western world. This is what Western values are. In the United States, my students were arrested peremptorily and dragged out of their dorms in front of their wives and put in confinement for several months. In Europe, people are being arrested for basic speech. In continental Europe, the European Union, people are being put on sanctions lists for scholarly reports that go against the word of the European Commission. So what we're seeing right now is a general crackdown on freedom. Judge, your show is all about freedom, and we're seeing freedom being drastically constricted in the so-called Western world, which professes to defend Western values of freedom, but does no such thing when it comes to people who speak out against the dominant narrative. Right now, we're seeing a kind of desperation and paranoia, I would say, of people in power in the United States and in the UK and in the European Union. It happens in slightly different ways in different places, but the crackdown on speech and very basic political speech is absolutely dramatic.
In the past 2 weeks, three events occurred with respect to China, Professor Sachs. The Trump administration released its national security strategy, which says China is not an enemy, it's an economic competitor. A good statement. But then, the week later, the Congress enacted and President Trump signed the National Defense Authorization Act, which in addition to giving the Defense Department, which now calls itself the War Department, $1 trillion in the next year, set aside $11 billion for offensive weaponry for Taiwan, which Scott Ritter says can reach Beijing.
Yes, this is acknowledged. Yes.
Then the president dispatched the United States Navy to seize an oil tanker coming out of Venezuela, the contents of which have been bought and paid for by a Chinese company. And he says, we're going to keep the oil and we're going to keep the ship.
And new penalties on Chinese trade that were just introduced within recent hours as well on Chinese semiconductors. So this is an administration that it has a very chaotic and unclear administration. There's a very violent side to it. Sometimes there's a rhetoric that is not violent, but there is no consistent line. And Washington is filled with warmongers, whatever one thinks. And those warmongers are rabidly anti-China. And so measures against China are bound to continue. The seizure of the tanker, which was flying a Panamanian flag, was not sanctioned, is an act of war because the United States, President Trump, who has no constitutional power to do it, has declared a blockade of Venezuela. Blockade is an act of war. Again, this is unconstitutional, but you and I know we really don't have Congress anymore. We don't hear from them. They play no role. They defend no prerogatives. Attempts to limit the president's power vis-a-vis Venezuela, because everyone can see that he is declaring war on his own, failed in the U.S. Congress because, of course, most of Congress fell into line with the president, and notably, of course, his own party members. So we're at war from a technical point of view and actually an operational point of view with Venezuela now because of a blockade, because of seizures of vessels. The targets of this are to overthrow a government, to capture Venezuela's oil reserves, to steal them, and to hinder trade with China. So it's a multiple bank shot, I guess you would call it, aiming at many different things, all of which are reckless and irresponsible and make the world a more dangerous place on this eve of the Christmas holidays, which are holidays of peace, after all. The world is a very, very dangerous place right now, and the U.S. contributes to that.
I'm going to play two clips. One, President Trump shamelessly saying what he plans to do with the oil and to do with the ship, and one brilliantly articulated by one of his predecessors when American ships were seized. Chris, back to back.
What are we going to do with the oil that we have?
Going to do with what?
The oil that has been seized. The United States seized 1.9 million barrels of oil on December 10th.
We're going to keep it. We're keeping it.
Where's it going? Are we going to sell it or put it in the strategic oil?
Maybe we'll sell it. Maybe we'll keep it. Maybe we'll use it in the strategic reserves. We're keeping it. We're keeping the ships also.
We have sought no shooting war with Hitler. We do not seek it now. But neither do we want peace so much that we are willing to pay for it by permitting him to attack our naval and merchant ships while they are on legitimate business. When you see a rattlesnake poised to strike, you do not wait until he has struck before you crush him. These Nazi submarines and raiders are the rattlesnakes of the Atlantic. They're a menace to the free pathways of the high seas. They are a challenge to our sovereignty. They hammer at our most precious rights when they attack ships of the American flag, symbols of our independence, our freedom, and our very life.
Has Donald Trump dispatched rattlesnakes to the Caribbean?
The whole point of American policy right now is to say we can do whatever we want. There are no rules. There is no international law. There's no one to stop us. And President Trump revels in being as outrageous as possible. He's trying to show this is brute power. If you resist us, we will crush you. It's the opposite of the rule of law. It's the opposite of what brings security in the world. It ratchets up the let's say the fever that is now very high already in Europe, in the United States, of war talk. It's extraordinarily reckless and dangerous. It has so many countries scared that they don't speak out against Trump right now because they fear him. That's what Trump wants. This is a dramatic show of force. It's good that you played Franklin Roosevelt. In my view, he was certainly the greatest president of the 20th century and until today, without question. And he had two great ideas Americans should remember. One is that in the midst of World War II, he conceived the United Nations because he said we needed an international law based on global cooperation, not on brute force. The U.S. was fighting brute force in Nazism. Franklin Roosevelt wanted the world to live according to international law and global cooperation. The other outstanding idea of Franklin Roosevelt, absolutely applicable today, is what he announced at the beginning of his first term, the good neighbor policy to the countries of the Americas. His distant sixth cousin, Teddy Roosevelt, at the beginning of the 20th century, who was a real imperialist, had declared, as we discussed earlier, the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. And the Roosevelt corollary, which was declared by Theodore Roosevelt when president in the first years of the 20th century, said the U.S. will be the policeman of the Americas and will intervene as it sees fit. And the Marines landed countless times in the Caribbean and in Central America under the so-called Roosevelt corollary. Well, this Roosevelt that we just watched, Franklin Roosevelt, said this is not right. It's not working. It's leading to unrest. It's raising insecurity across the Western Hemisphere. He pledged a good neighbor policy where the United States would not intervene violently or militarily in the affairs of other countries of the Americas. And he kept his word. And in 1948, the countries of the Western Hemisphere signed a charter creating the Organization of American States. And in that charter is non-intervention in the internal affairs of other countries. Donald Trump is not only reverting to the Roosevelt corollary, he's doing much more. He's announced a kind of thuggish corollary. We will do what we want, where we want, against any principles, any rules, any international law, any regional agreements, any charters. We'll keep the oil. It's ours. We don't care. And that's what he's absolutely delighted to proclaim. He's trying to scare the wits out of the rest of the world. If you think this brings security to you and to me and to the American people, I would beg to differ. This raises our insecurity at a time when we could be the most secure and safest people in the world if we stopped raising the temperature around the planet by all these threats and this unilateralism and doing whatever we want because we are the toughest, meanest, baddest guy on the block. What are we doing? Selling weapons to Taiwan? Would we like it if China sold weapons to the state of Pennsylvania? I don't think we would like that at all. And yet we meddle internally at the most intense and dangerous pressure points, whether it was trying to push NATO to Ukraine or seizing tankers against international law, or selling weapons to Taiwan against the vociferous objections of China and China's brightest of bright red lines. And we think this is smart and this is good and this is the American way. And all it does is endanger us further. That's what's happening right now. It's incredible. It's as if there are just no grown-ups around that understand the basic idea that you operate with principles if you want to stay safe. And if you operate like a bully, this is the prelude to disaster.
Last weekend, Kirill Dmitriev, an unofficial non-governmental representative of President Putin, met in Florida with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. The Russians have been clear from day one what their goals are in the special military operation. They have not wavered, and it's not negotiable. What did these three talk about? What could they possibly accomplish?
I think the biggest problem with Ukraine is that this war started because the United States and Europe said, we can own Ukraine. We can bring Ukraine into our fold. Of course, it took American complicity in a coup to bring down a neutral government. It took America and Europe blowing off a treaty that was agreed in 2015 called the Minsk II Agreement that would have settled the war on the basis of giving autonomy to the ethnic Russian-speaking regions of eastern Ukraine. And even though it was a unanimous UN Security Council resolution, the United States and Europe and Ukraine said, we're not going to follow it. And as we've talked about, I said to Jake Sullivan on the eve of Russia's special military operation in February 2022, Jake, you can avoid this war by making clear that NATO will not expand to Ukraine. And he said, well, NATO's not going to expand to Ukraine, but we're not going to say it. And I said, you're going to have a war over something that's not even going to happen. Well, recently, one of Sullivan's associates on the U.S. National Security Council, thinking that she was speaking to Ukrainian officials, but in fact speaking to pranksters, said exactly what I have been saying for years, that the U.S. National Security Council knew in December 2021 that they could avoid this war, notably the escalation, because the war actually began with the coup that the U.S. supported in February 2014, but with the escalation of the war that occurred in February 2022, they could avoid it by making clear that NATO would not enlarge. And now it's on the record what I've been saying, and I knew to be true, of course, through my conversations, but now it's been explicitly stated by a former senior U.S. official, exactly this point. Now, the reason I mention all of this is that in these negotiations that are taking place, President Trump either is unwilling or unable to speak clearly about any issue. So negotiations take place in Mar-a-Lago or in some other place, but we don't have the President of the United States clearly, honestly, like a grown-up, just explaining to the American people, NATO enlargement was wrong. It led to this war. We say that it has to stop. And on that basis, the fact that Ukraine will be neutral and the United States does not support NATO enlargement, the war would come to an end. Yes, there are other issues as well, but clarity by the President of the United States would make this happen. But he doesn't speak to us clearly. We get true social messages which contradict each other by the hour or by the day, lots of capital letters, lots of exclamation points, but no presidential speech that explains anything about principles, because unfortunately we're not operating on clarity and principles right now. And what happens, therefore, is that the warmongering, which is a deep part of the Washington culture and very much embedded in Germany in particular, and in Brussels, which is led by a former German official, Ursula von der Leyen, in the EU Commission, continue the warmongering. And Britain always loves a war against Russia. So Britain you can count on for endless warmongering. It's been that way basically since 1840. And because of this lack of clear explanation, explication, these negotiations go around in circles. They go up, they go down. They don't mean anything. The war has gone on for a year when it was supposed to have been a phone call at the beginning of this year that would end it. And it could have ended it, actually, through a phone call. But President Trump is not presidential in this sense. A president would state principles, explain them, bring the American people along, bring the Congress along, explain why peace is in the U.S. interest, stop the warmongers that are all around his own administration, and of course in the Congress and in the military contractors and in Silicon Valley, which has made a lot of money in this war and in the war in Gaza, and be presidential. And I'm still hoping for it because if it happens, then we'll have peace.
I'm still very troubled by the warmongers in Europe, a few of whom you've just named, and their absurd underestimations of Russia, their absurd underestimations of President Putin's determination to preserve his legitimate, the nation's legitimate right to sovereignty and security. Why is Germany, why is Great Britain, whose entire military could fit into Yankee Stadium and there would still be empty seats, threatening Russia?
Well, I think I would put it a slightly different way. And that is that for the last 140 years, the Western countries have repeatedly rejected peace with Russia on every strategic occasion. They've always viewed Russia as the other, as the evil empire. And even when making peace with Russia is the obvious thing to do, the right thing to do, the thing that brings security, the West again and again and again has rejected it. It was Britain and France that made a war of choice in 1853 called the Crimean War to push Russia out of the Black Sea. This was the British Empire trying to not only give a bloody nose to Russia, but basically to eliminate Russia as a counterpart or in any way a competitor to the British Empire. So this was raw power. In the 1930s, to jump ahead, when Hitler had come to power, the Soviet Union reached out to Britain, to France, and to Poland to say we should have a common front against Hitler. If you can believe it, it's so shocking to learn all of the details. Britain, France, and Poland till the end, rejected making an alliance with the Soviet Union, in effect with Russia, because they said that's Russia. So Hitler did not face an alliance that could have actually stopped World War II at the outset. The alliance only came after Hitler controlled continental Europe and attacked the Soviet Union in June 1941. At the end of World War II, again, the West rejected peace with the Soviet Union. Instead, it remilitarized its part of occupied Germany, putting Germany, which had just killed 27 million Soviet citizens, it remilitarized Germany and put it at the heart of NATO. That was a choice to divide Europe into military blocs. That was a Western choice, not a Soviet choice. The Soviet Union was appealing for German neutrality and demilitarization. In 1989 to 1992-93, Germany called for the East and the West to be reunified, and it promised the Soviet Union, you let Germany be reunified, and we guarantee NATO will not move 1 inch eastward. And while that is denied by a lot of people right now, it's the absolute God-given truth that that promise was made repeatedly. And then the United States and Germany cheated on it right away and began NATO enlargement eastward. The point is, Judge, the West has rejected peace with Russia or the Soviet Union, of which Russia was by far the main part, repeatedly for 180 years, since the 1840s. This is a deep Russophobia that has done immeasurable damage to Europe over and over again by this reckless, rampant, unjustified, unreal distrust and cheating, violating agreements that the West has made, whether at Potsdam or to Gorbachev in February 1990, and on many other occasions, and refusing collective security with Russia or the Soviet Union on many occasions. It has led to European wars repeatedly, or European vulnerability repeatedly. So what we're witnessing right now is a kind of reflexive action of the West, this time, not surprisingly, led by France, Britain, and Germany, which have played this mistaken, disastrous game again and again and again and again, and they're doing it again, one more time. And it's so sad to watch, and it's deeply, deeply threatening for Europe, first and foremost, because they're walking into another war. They're even predicting it. They're calling for it in its way. It's bizarre. It's tragic, but it's a repeated pattern based on a Russophobia that goes back almost 2 centuries.
A very sad state of affairs. I thank you, Professor Sachs, for your brilliant and gifted explanation of how we got to where we are today. We do have a little holiday treat for you. One of your favorite presidents with one of his favorite speeches.
In the field of world policy, I would dedicate this nation to the policy of the good neighbor, the neighbor who resolutely respects himself, and because he does so, respects the rights of others, the neighbor who respects his obligations and respects the sanctity of agreements in and with a world of neighbors. That declaration represented my purpose then. It represents my purpose now, but it represents more than a purpose now, for it stands for a practice. To a measurable degree, the practice has succeeded. And the whole world now knows that the United States cherishes no predatory ambition.
Oh, how the times have changed, Professor.
Well,
Sachs.
bless you for showing us that. Merry Christmas. This is a wonderful thing to watch. It gives us some hope, actually.
Thank you. Thank you. The best of everything to you and your family in this holiday season. I think you may know that last weekend, Judging Freedom reached 100 million views in 2025 for the second year in a row. Thanks in no small measure to you. You come
I'm in India, and people are stopping me on the street saying, I watch Judge Napolitano.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, everywhere I go, I'm seeing this. It's wonderful.
Well, no matter where you are so faithful to the show, and our professional relationship and personal friendship has been a great gift to me. And I thank you. And I thank Dr. Sachs, Sonia, your wife. I thank you for everything. Safe travels. We'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Wonderful. Happy New Year to you. Happy holidays.
Back at you. Thank you.
And everybody.
Thank you. Oh, a great and brilliant man. That's an understatement. Coming up, more greatness at 1 o'clock, Aaron Mate. At 2 o'clock, Matt Ho. At 3 o'clock, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. Ending the day at 4 with Max Blumenthal, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.